when the world is in crisis
การแก้ไขปัญหาโควิดถือเป็นวาระแห่งชาติ
and people are looking for hope and answers. Thai PBS World is there with you with the best minds of the day. Join us on Thai PBS World tonight, every weekdays at 7 p.m. Thai PBS World, we bring Thailand to the world.
สวัสดีค่ะ Very good evening and welcome to our 7 o'clock news Thai PBS World Tonight. I am Natha Gomunwadin.
And good evening, I'm Thep Chai Yong. Another day with no locally transmitted infection of coronavirus. Another day of good news for 31 consecutive days now.
Yes, and only one new infection.
That's right.
But probably not quite good news in terms of state of emergency, Kun Thep Chai.
That's right. Because with most of the lockdown measures having been eased, one big question is how much longer will the state of emergency be in place? As I'm sure that this is a question in the mind of many people. But if some of the officials of the Center for COVID-19 Situation Administration in charge of security have their way, it's almost likely that it will be extended by another month. The current state of emergency will expire at the end of June, that is a week from now. But National Security Council Secretary General Somsak Rungsita said today that there are still concerns about the COVID-19 situation. Therefore, there's a need for the state of emergency to be retained. He said the proposal to extend the state of emergency for another month will be decided in a meeting of the Anti-COVID-19 Center chaired by Prime Minister Prawit tomorrow. The government has been under pressure from critics and opposition politicians to lift the state of emergency, which they claim is being abused by authorities to stifle freedom of expression and freedom of assembly.
The timing is quite crucial, Kun Thep Chai, because next week is fifth phase of easing restriction and the school will be reopened and nightlife entertainment venue will be allowed to reopen as well, but probably the government would like to take control in terms of the situation, so to remain state of emergency for one more month. But from the 1st of July, a group of foreign visitors can also visit Thailand, and those groups will comprise business representatives, skilled workers, experts, people with Thai families, teachers and patients who agreed to quarantine according to the government. And the plan was drafted by COVID-19 Situation Administration. So the first batch of 50,000 foreigners are likely to visit the country under the new rules, include 30,000 people arrive for medical and wellness tourism. And others will include about 15,000 skilled workers and experts, 2,000 teachers, educational personnel and students, 2,000 foreigners with Thai families or with residences in Thailand, and about 700 business people and investors. So that's the clear group of foreign visitors that Thailand will allow to enter Thailand from the 1st of July.
And this is a scene that we'll be seeing in the next few weeks now, when the first group of foreigners will arrive at the Suvarnabhumi and Dongmyeong airports. And of course, this can be considered as the first step of the so-called travel bubble, which has been talked about for quite some time now. And of course, we need yet to see the list of countries that will enter into this kind of a special arrangement with Thailand.
Yes.
But of course, this is good news for the travel business and tourist industry, which has been hard hit by the pandemic.
Yes, and as Kun Thep Chai told us from the very beginning today, the new infection case is only one, and it's imported case from Egypt. And it makes Thailand having no local transmission for 31 consecutive days already. So it's about a month, 31 days. So that's good news. Only one new case today. The new case today was a male student, 24, who returned to Thailand from Egypt on June the 9th. according to CCSA, and he was found to have contracted the virus on Tuesday after his second test while in quarantine under a state program in Chonburi.
And of course, despite all the good news, we need to continue to echo the words of caution from health authorities. That is, don't lower your guards. I mean,
Yes.
practice social distancing as you have been doing for the past 3 months. And of course, you have to be very careful when you go out. Even
Yes.
though all the entertainment venues will be reopened starting most likely next week. Of course, you can be too complacent because there is always a caution that you need to be aware of when you are out in the open.
Yes.
Okay. All right, if you are wondering how politically divided that Thai people in the society still are, I mean, what is happening to a very popular influencer on the social media should give you a good answer. Sean Brunnahiran must have thought that he was giving his millions of young followers on YouTube and Facebook a lesson in life when he posted a video of himself talking about how they should not pass judgment on people and to avoid being influenced by the media and by what they see in the media. But the problem was that Sean probably chose a wrong reference to illustrate his point. Sean said in his post on Tuesday that he had just met Deputy Prime Minister Prawit during a tree planting event in Chiang Mai province. And this is what he had to say about the ex-general. Just met Kun Prawit. He doesn't appear to be like in the memes that portray him rather negatively. In person, he appears to be a lovely Pujai. So don't judge people by what you see in the media, not until you have met them, talked to them, and got to know them.
Yes. And then he went on to relate to his young followers what he said he learned while growing up in the US. Believe half of what you see, none of what you hear. The video clip has triggered a heated debate on the social media. With a campaign to unfriend him, his followers immediately dropped by almost 1 million before bouncing back. Sean is 28, Kuntepchai, and has Thai parents, but was born and raised in the United States. He later moved to Thailand to make a name for himself as an inspirational speaker and an influencer with as many as 4 million followers on Facebook.
Yeah, his video angered many people who are opposed to the Prawit government and General Prawit in particular. Kun Prawit last year was embroiled in a scandal involving the possession of dozens of luxury wristwatches, but he was later cleared by the National Counter-Corruption Commission, but not before his image had been seriously tarnished. Many people question Sean for trying to portray General Prawit in a positive light after having met him only once. And in the subsequent Facebook post yesterday, Sean said he is open to comments from all sides and will use his social media platform to serve the society. I will stop talking and work harder, he said. And today,
Yeah.
Kunnata, reporters tried to get General Prawit to comment on the incident. But the Deputy Prime Minister said he was not aware of it and that he didn't even remember meeting Sean. There were too many people on that day, that was General Prawit said. So this whole incident only shows how popular or unpopular General Prawit is now.
Yes. And probably for Sean, it's beyond expectation that his comment just about General Prawit will draw so much attention and so much criticism on him. And last night, about 1 million followers has withdrawn, unfollow him, but they bounced back. It's quite interesting.
It's very, very interesting because when he was asked about the incident today, General Prawit saying something that was interpreted as him probably not knowing much about Sean. And we said, who is he? What did he do? And then he said, well, I can't remember meeting him because on that day there were so many people in Chiang Mai.
Yes.
He was talking about a tree planting ceremony in Chiang Mai. in which Sean also participated, and that's where the two met. And of course, I mean, Sean somehow was impressed by General Prawit's appearance on that day, appearing to be a very sweet and nice ผู้ใหญ่ but in Thai ผู้ใหญ่ means a senior person.
Yes.
So in short, Sean was very impressed by by Prawit on that meeting. But of course, this didn't strike the right chord with critics on the social media, who suddenly hit back at Sean for his video clip.
Yeah, so probably he learned it hard ways as influencer and make comments regarding public figure, especially politician. And that's the story about Sean Runahilan, popular influencer in Thailand. And another development in Australia about COVID-19 and airline industry in particular, especially Qantas Airways, that they announced to reduce the workforce for about 20%. What's really coming up right now, we have Kun Nat Bunak updating this story for us. So what's the latest situation about Qantas and Australia?
It's not a good day for Australia, whether it's for the airline business or even the COVID-19 situation itself. So let's start with the airline business first. Qantas has announced today that they will have to cut at least 20% of the workforce, which is part of their measures in response to the pandemic. As we're all aware that the pandemic has highly affected the airline businesses around the world, and Qantas is no exception. So for the job cuts here, at least 6,000 positions among its 29,000 employees will be cut, while another 15,000 staff, especially those associated with international operations, would remain stood down temporarily until more flying returns. And Qantas also has plans to ground 100 aircrafts up to a year or longer, as well as to retire its 6 remaining aircrafts, which are Boeing 747, immediately, which initially they plan to retire the 6 remaining Boeing aircrafts 6 months later, but they decided to do it immediately because of this situation.
And what about COVID-19 in Australia?
So the situation of COVID-19 in Australia is not really good either, because the state of Victoria has found 33 new cases of COVID-19, which is the biggest jump in more than 2 months. So according to the Victoria State Premier Daniel Andrews, authorities already started the testing blitz around 10 areas, so the 10 most affected suburbs in Melbourne. So let's have a listen to what the Premier has to say.
We will test 50% of those suburbs over the next 3 days. There will literally be hundreds and hundreds, indeed the entire team is 1,000 strong, door knockers out there talking to the community, inviting them to come and get a free test, whether they be symptomatic or asymptomatic. That'll be done in lots of new ways. For instance, we have ambulances and other vans that will literally be at the end of people's streets. So they will be invited to come and get a test, and they'll only have to travel 50 or 100 metres in order to complete that test. And vice versa.
So to keep it simple, they went ahead with the testing as well as the testing blitz across 10 most affected suburbs in Melbourne, as well as the ambulances, as well as sending personnel from the Australian Defence Force to Melbourne, including the quarantine hotels around the city, to curb the spread of the virus. So the current situation at the moment here, the state of Victoria is the second state in Australia with the most cases of COVID-19, with a total of around 1,900 infections with 20 deaths, which is slightly behind New South Wales, which has the most cases with a total of 3,162 infections and 49 deaths.
Yeah, it's getting worse. And what's the response from Australian Prime Minister?
So the Prime Minister Scott Morrison made an announcement today that Australia has safeguards in place to prevent the virus, but he also insisted that they should continue with the reopening for states and territories. So let's have a listen.
Just watching that. We've got to live alongside COVID. It's not going anywhere. And we now have to look forward to, and we've got the systems and protections in place, as we're demonstrating even now, with the outbreak in Victoria, and I think we've just got to keep all that in perspective, and we've got to keep forging ahead and do that together. We can respond to these outbreaks. We can deal with it. We are dealing with the coronavirus, the COVID-19, better than almost any country in the world. And that's got to give us confidence to be able to move ahead, whether it's in this sector or in any of the other sectors. But there will be sectors that will be harder hit for longer, and that's what today is about. Thank you.
So he believes that Australia will still have to live with COVID-19, but they can all get through this with the measures that are going on across the country.
Yeah, but it seems that the leader of Australia seems doing his job, try to assure the whole nation that they can handle the situation.
Definitely, he remains positive in such a situation right now.
Okay, thank you very much, Kun Nat.
Thank you.
And in other regions of the world, like Mexico, people there are coping with quake, but worse. For some patients, they also need to be treated with virus under the situation of having earthquake. So let's take a look at this story.
Frontline health workers and patients inside the ICU unit of a military hospital dedicated to tend to COVID-19 patients reacted after a powerful earthquake that hit Mexico on Tuesday. The Mexico City government reported no losses or damage in hospitals in Mexico City after the 7.4 earthquake, including the hospital Juarez, the third largest in Mexico tending to COVID-19 patients. Inside a Mexico City military barracks converted to COVID-19 hospital, medical staff suited in protective equipment tried to calm anxious patients. The hospital serves both military personnel and civilians. Hundreds of military facilities throughout the country have been converted into hospitals in the last 2 months as part of the government plan to prevent the collapse of the healthcare system. Unable to evacuate isolation areas, patients huddled under a large beam in a woman's ward while a nurse tried to calm one having a panic attack.
Sentí la cama así porque estaba yo medio dormitando y sentí la cama y eso le digo que me...
Teresa Juarez could only wish for it to pass quickly from her hospital bed where she lay connected to oxygen. Diabetic and with high blood pressure, Juarez said she thought about her 5 children. The U.S. Geological Survey said the quake hit at 10:29 a.m. along Mexico's southern Pacific coast at a depth of 26 kilometers and was felt in Guatemala and throughout South and Central Mexico. The U.S. Geological Survey estimated that some 2 million people felt strong or moderate shaking, and another 49 million felt weak or light shaking.
Obviously, COVID-19 is a big challenge not only for population but especially for leaders around the world that they have to be coping with COVID-19 and try to maintain strong leadership at the same time. And right now we have Kun Apisit Vechachiwa, former Prime Minister, joining us to try to analyze new normal politics in Thailand and around the world in the age of COVID-19. Sawadee, good evening for joining us.
Okay, thank you for being here, Kun Apisit, a great honor for us. So how has life been for you now being an inactive politician for the first time in almost 3 decades, right? Coupled with the lockdown because of the COVID-19.
So I was in lockdown even before COVID-19.
So how has your life been in the past few months?
Much more relaxing, obviously, but still remains a concerned citizen, looking around both what's happening in the country and also in the world.
So mostly working from home, stay at home?
Yes, mostly staying at home, following government policy.
Yeah, and enjoying having more time with the cats?
Well, to tell the truth, the last year has been good in that, for the first time in about 30 years, where I really have time for myself, more time for my family, certainly. And no weight of responsibility on my shoulders.
Yes, and you have big fans on your page of cats.
Well, they're probably fans of cats, not my fans.
being known more as a cat man than being a politician
Well,
now, right?
It's forced upon me because
Yeah, with 26 cats.
30 actually.
30.
It's 30, yeah. They all belong to my daughter.
Yes.
So we live in the same house, so I have to look after them too.
Yeah, and your favorite one,
It's
Moji and Muji.
yes. Moji and Muji.
Is it
Yeah.
easier, more difficult looking after cats than looking after politicians once
Oh,
under your
yes.
camp?
Well, I was asked the other day how they managed to stay together, 30 of them, and my reply was, well, looks like they're more orderly than politicians.
Yeah. So how do you keep yourself updated with Democrat Party then?
Well, I follow the news in general, but obviously people who know me, and obviously people within the party, still contact me.
Yes.
Phone calls, conversations every now and then.
Okay. You were at the dinner last night, right? At the tea house?
Tuesday night, yes.
Tuesday, right? How was it? How was the atmosphere? It was held amid rumors of infighting within the party.
Well, the party leader says that he wants to try to do this on a regular basis. I'm not sure. I mean, at least it shows that people are willing to come. They want to see unity. But if there are problems to be ironed out, they will have to get to grips with that. One meal is not going to make all those problems go away.
Yeah, but Kun Jurin said from now on you should be meeting like once a month.
But even so, because you don't discuss all the issues there, but it might provide some kind of warmth, and people might be more willing to talk to each other more. But I think there are genuine differences in views, which is quite normal for political parties, especially the Democrat Party, where most of us are fairly independent-minded and liberals by nature.
So you don't see these ripples as being a sign of a possible, a blow-up of infighting within the party?
I wouldn't know because I don't have a position in the party. I rarely go in now, so I don't know the facts. But I can sense that there are some people who wish to see some changes. They're a bit frustrated that perhaps the party is not heading in a clear direction like they want to see. So they want to make their views known. So it's up to the executive committee and the party leader to try to address those issues.
So in situation like this, are you glad to be out, or you think you're missing out something?
Well, me being out is not really related to this kind of issue. It's a question of political stance. I committed myself to saying that I wouldn't support the current Prime Minister. Since the party has decided to join the coalition, it's best for me to stay out.
And any chance of you revising your decision to be leader of Democrat Party again?
Certainly at this particular moment, I don't think the party would be in a position to review its stance on being part of the government. And I don't think the public wants to see political maneuverings at this particular time. I think they, whether they like the government or not, they'd rather see a politics that gets on with taking the country through this crisis. So I don't think there's any question of the party reviewing its stance on this issue, and therefore there's absolutely no reason why I would come back.
But you can only wish the party the best of luck.
Well, I hope I can do a bit more by talking to people and trying to offer my advice or views.
Yeah. So you must have got more free time as an outsider to see how Prawit government has handled the situation of COVID-19, and especially last week when he mentioned new normal approach. What's your take?
Well, that's two separate and very big questions. I think the handling of the crisis, I think there was a pivotal moment when the Prime Minister decided to basically hand over to the decision making almost to the technicians, the leading medical experts. And I think they've played a very important role. And also due to both the strength of our health system, which is not just doctors and nurses, but also the health volunteers that we have up and down the country, all working very hard. And to the surprise, I think, even of ourselves, we, the people, have been fairly disciplined in cooperating with government policy. So we've come through what we might say is the first phase with some success. But the issue of the handling of the economic impact is a different matter. My own view is that the government has made things far too complicated and therefore took too much time in helping people. It would have been, after all, in the end, they're going to be helping, 20, 30, 40 million people anyway. If they had started off like many, including myself, had suggested, which is that they should be aiming at some kind of almost universal scheme, and then just looking at who should be the exceptions, and do that quickly without placing the burden on the people receiving the help, I think we would have had a quicker and a bigger impact on sustaining the economy, and we wouldn't have all these complaints about all the glitches and so on. We've already lost one minister.
That's right.
Well, not yet, but about to lose at least one minister because of this.
Okay. I believe that as you are watching how the pandemic is wreaking havoc on the country and how the government has been handling the situation, at some point you must be asking yourself, how would I handle this situation if it happened during my watch, right? So how would you have done differently besides the
I think on the health side,
yeah.
The approach is almost the same everywhere, but the ability to manage and to put in various schemes will depend on the efficiency of the people who are doing the work. There was one moment when I thought that we might have made a mistake. That was when they decided to close restaurants and places in Bangkok without yet putting in place a scheme to assure people that they would be compensated. And everybody went out back home to the provinces. I thought that was one moment where they might have made a mistake. But for a number of reasons, including the work of the health volunteers in the rural areas, that has been, we escaped that, I think, rather narrowly. But on the whole, the approach is right. On the economy, I mentioned already, I would have probably done the compensation differently. And one thing I think we're still lacking, if there's been management of the situation, we haven't seen much in terms of leadership. I say that because I'm sure it's not just me, but so many people are still wondering what is the strategy. We're not really told the kind of scenarios that we would be facing and how the government wants to handle things. Everything has been somewhat reactive, although quite efficient in reacting to the problems, but very few things in terms of forward-looking and particularly communicating to people. So even the recent speech on the new normal, I would guess that majority of people still don't know what that is going to entail. And what the Prime Minister said was new normal was pretty much a standard good governance set of good governance principles, but it has to be backed up by action. And the other thing that I think I would have done differently right from the start, which I suggested many months ago, was that this was actually a good opportunity for the Prime Minister and the government to show that they want to reach out to the opposition, people who disagree or do not like the government. We haven't seen much of that happening, and despite now the Prime Minister calling for cooperation and unity. There is no, you cannot demand cooperation from people who think different from you. You have to reach out to them.
Okay. But wasn't his address last week enough to show that he is willing to shake hands with whoever?
Well, when a few months ago, I suggested that, why doesn't the Prime Minister invite the opposition leader or party leaders, say, to Government House and, discuss the situation, ask for cooperation before the executive decrees went to Parliament? You're not going to get them to agree on everything. But I think it would have been a very powerful signal that this was truly a new normal.
And you would have done that?
I think so, yes. I would have done that.
Can he do it now?
Well, it's not too late, but it's more difficult now. I think certainly if it was done a couple of months ago, I can't see the opposition saying, no, we won't go. Today, I'm not so sure.
And what about the decision to extend state of emergency?
I think that this needs a bit of explanation. There are two things that the decree does. One is you're taking power away from the ministers to basically the permanent secretaries and then reporting directly to the Prime Minister. Now, I think if the Prime Minister is on top of the coalition, you don't need the decree for that. You can now, I think, in a situation which is now, certainly the health situation is largely resolved as far as internal cases are concerned. That might not be necessary. The second thing are the legal powers. Now, if it's necessary, say for instance, if you still need to force people into state quarantines, and you don't have a law that allows you to do that, except for maybe by declaring a state of emergency, then say so, and say also that you would not use other powers. Then I think that would address the people who are opposing the extension of the decree. I haven't heard a clear explanation of why the state of emergency is needed for what. So if they explain that, like before, I think it was necessary because of the curfew. Now I think the curfew is seen as not needed for the current situation.
But how difficult it is for a Prime Minister to decide to impose a state of emergency? You have been through this before.
Right. Well, my take has always been that it has to be used as little as possible. And to prove that, one of the things that I did when I was Prime Minister was, a lot of people complain about the state of emergency. But the people in the three southern provinces have been living with this for 14, 15 years, right? When I was Prime Minister, I began this process of trying to lift the state of emergency, which I did in one of the districts in the provinces as a pilot project. So my attitude would be to use it as little as possible and make clear exactly why you are using it.
So overall, you are not quite convinced with Prime Minister initiative of new normal approach. You won't see it can happen.
Well, what he's saying, he's asking basically for unity and cooperation, which is fine. And I think we would like to see it. But as I said, he needs to lead that process. You can't just, if Kuntep Chai and I disagree on most things, I can't just say, well, let's be united and expect Kuntep Chai to follow me or to agree with me. I need to go and say, can you come and can we discuss?
To sit down and talk.
Can we be open-minded about this? And what are the differences that we might be able to preserve? And what are the differences that we might put aside for the timing? So it needs a bit of active initiation on the part of the Prime Minister. And the second thing, as I said, is that we don't often hear exactly how the government has mapped out its strategy for the future. And all of this is not being helped by what's happening within the coalition parties, including the Palang Pracharat, where daily news of political maneuverings and possible conflicts and the replacement perhaps of some of the ministers. So this is one clear issue where I think it would be helpful if the Prime Minister would be open about it. So for instance, if he has decided that no, there's not going to be a reshuffle, that Kun Somkit or the economic team can get on the say so. Or if he is thinking of a reshuffle, well then just do it and get it done so we can move on to the substance of what needs to be done in terms of policy.
No, he did say that there will be a cabinet reshuffle, but not now. But it doesn't really explain things, right?
Well, that's exactly what I think you don't need. You either say you're not going to do it,
or you do it.
or if you do it as quickly as possible. The last thing you want is a period of uncertainty where, with all the money that's going to be spent from the executive decrees, now, awaiting who is going to come and manage that.
You think General Prawit is still the same General Prawit that he has always been? And you see any changes in his style of leadership?
No, I think he has evolved through the last 5-6 years, and it will be difficult to know what you mean by the old or the new, because there's been an evolution where obviously he has to transform himself from a leader from a coup to somebody who's now heading a coalition with political parties.
No, but that doesn't in any way change your stand on his legitimacy.
Well, I think I've been clear about my stance. And some of the things that were the reasons why I made my stance, I think remains valid. And what I've said about people around him with questionable background and so on, I'd like to see him lead by example. When he says that he wants people to respect the law, to practice good governance, I think he needs to do more. During my time, a minister who has been accused of, I think, far lesser crimes than some of the people in the cabinet now, they resigned, and actually subsequently they were investigated and found to be innocent. But that's the kind of standard that I'd like to see when you talk about, political reform, new normal, even if you want to use that terminology.
But he hasn't taken that chance. It's a pity that he didn't really move to.
Well, to be fair to him, I think he's still grappling with the old style of politics, which unfortunately the Constitution has helped foster, and that's going to be with us for quite some time, because the way the rules are written, with the Senate being able to pick a prime minister, a lot of politicians decided all they want to do now is to make sure they have a group of 8 to 9 or 10 friends and demand a position in government.
In terms of economic outlook, it's quite gloomy for Thailand, probably -8%, and that's forecast by IMF as well. So what do you think would be the way out for Thailand?
Well, it's not just us. But
we
obviously,
are the worst.
Well, we were underperforming even before COVID-19. I think we were growing probably slowest in the region. So that's one thing that needs to be kept in mind. The second thing, obviously, is that we do depend a lot on income, especially from the tourism sector. That makes up almost, a fifth of our national income. And that is, almost disappeared in the whole year. So yes, there has to be a strategy of how, number one, you sustain the income of people, and number two, what's going to replace while that is absent. And you have to admit that we are operating under great uncertainty because we do not yet know when this will end. There's so much talk about the vaccines as being the end point. I think people forget, number one, there is still uncertainty whether it can be, that we will get one. And number two, even if, technically we've got one, how are you going to allocate, distribute, and what will be the price of the vaccines?
Yeah.
And you will need what? 60% of the population, global population, to make sure that they're...
Yeah.
So people haven't really thought through about practicalities of this. So there is a great deal of uncertainty that lies ahead, which means that any kind of strategy needs to be flexible, and which is why I think it would be nice if the Prime Minister would, or the government would communicate to people that we would try to do this, but if this happens, we will then have plan B. If this doesn't happen, we can go ahead. And I think that would allow people to plan. Like the way they are opening up in the last month or month and a half, there were a lot of private sector operators who were not ready because they did not know exactly when things would open up. And once the law allows them, but they've taken some decisions concerning their employees and so on, they're not able to take advantage of that. So I think if there is more forward thinking and communications about what the government plans to do, I think it would really help.
But in order to revive the...
And the other thing, of course, is I have to say is that, and this is not just a criticism of the Thai government, but basically international and multilateral cooperation has been sadly lacking. Take the health issue. I think the WHO has not been able to play any kind of role that would allow the world to confront this together despite declaring it a global pandemic. Just imagine if there was a coordinated effort for lockdown. We wouldn't have the situation where the disease moves its epicenter from Asia to Europe to North America and now to South America. And then it's going around in a circle.
Yeah,
because,
it was very confusing in the beginning.
But if you are saying this is a global pandemic, you should be at least trying to craft some kind of global response.
It's quite clear that it's the absence of global
Exactly,
leadership.
and this is now coming back to make things difficult. Because, for instance, we talk about travel bubbles. How is that going to be? How is that going to be made concrete? And the situation is so volatile. We talk about possibilities, say, of Australia, but now there's news that there could be a second wave and so on.
Right.
So that is part of the problem, and also in the medium and longer term, I think multilateralism is suffering. It was already there was a shortage of multilateral cooperation even before COVID, but now that has been made really plain by the global pandemic, and it makes globalization much more difficult now because so many countries will try to turn inwards, blaming globalization or opening up for the ills, when in fact if we had a good multilateral response, this would be the case.
Do you think things would have been different had the US have taken that leadership role in this context?
Well, the US is hardly in a position to lead now, and well, this is unfortunate because I think the US president has even before the pandemic decided that rather than championing all the global principles and rules that bind us together, he's always said that he's not going to be interested in that. And so now that makes it difficult for America to lead. At the same time, obviously now China has emerged as a power that can exploit this weakness in the.
That's true. Yeah, that's
in
one
the
biggest
US.
challenges that are waiting us. I mean, the re-emerging of China. And,
Right, and how would the U.S. Try to enforce some of the principles that I think it used to stand for, when it's pretty much lost the moral high ground.
Okay. So let's see what will happen in November election then.
It may cost President Trump his presidency because of COVID-19.
Well, no, it's just even before that. And I say that to my American friends, that if you have somebody who used to be seen as a leader of the free world suddenly say, well, all the rules that you have been saying to the rest of the world that we should follow, you're not going to follow yourself. Whether it's on trade, whether it's on immigration, whether it's on whatever, then how do you expect to continue to lead?
So it's quite ironic for the US president at this very juncture.
Well, even before COVID, a lot of countries see the Chinese president talking about supporting multilateral arrangements and free trade, whereas the US president is saying the opposite.
So back to Thai politics, visit. How do you see this growing political activism? Yesterday, for example, there were pockets of demonstrations around the country.
Well, I wouldn't call it growing activism. You have to remember before COVID-19, the political situation then, number one, we just had the no confidence motion. And there was a lot of expectation that something needed to change, at least to address some of the issues raised by that debate. Number two, there was conflict around the dissolution of the Future Forward Party, where the new generation, rightly or wrongly, feels that they've been disenfranchised. Number three, the issue of the Constitution itself, where part of the conditions that the Democrat joined the coalition was that there would be a serious attempt to amend the Constitution. So, I mean, these were all there. The COVID-19 came, sort of put that to rest for a while. But now, as the situation sort of dies down, I mean, all these issues are coming back. And
a resumption of what was happening before.
So that's why I'm not saying it's growing. It's I think
continuation.
It's a continuation, and it's been there, and it will probably grow if it's not addressed properly.
And so how do you see these demands made by these, especially the students? We haven't seen this kind of activism for years.
This is exactly why I said that had the Prime Minister reached out when dealing with issues like the pandemic, which is easier to get agreement, it would then set things up nicely for him to seek dialogue on these more sensitive and difficult issues. But at the moment, I still don't see how the two sides are coming together to be open about this. And each side might feel that, well, they will win, or they might feel that politically it's convenient to still feed on the what I call the politics of fear and hatred of the other side. But as time goes on, that's going to serve nobody, and certainly not the country.
Okay, so that's the view from Kun Abhisit Vechachiwa, former Prime Minister, in assessing leadership of Thailand and global leadership right now in coping with COVID-19. But you have to stay with us because we will come back to talk to you in Thai with Than Lok and with Thai PBS World. But that's all for Thai PBS World tonight. So please stay tuned with us at 8 o'clock. We will come back with Than Lok with Thai PBS World.
Thank you for watching.
When the world is in crisis
การแก้ไขปัญหาโควิดถือเป็นวาระแห่งชาติ
and people are looking for hope and answers, Thai PBS World is there with you with the best minds of the day. Join us on Thai PBS World tonight, every weekdays at 7 p.m. Thai PBS World, we bring Thailand to the world.